Hey everybody, my name is Lightstone. I'm a human excellence coach. So I get asked all the time about boundaries. I find in my healing practice and how I share this with friends and clients, the boundaries have three particular facets. So the first is knowing what that boundary is for yourself. You have to understand where is the actual boundary of my own being, literally my physical flesh, maybe some ideological perspective that I have about myself, or something that I'm not comfortable doing. So when I have this concept of this is where I begin and other ends, I then can internalize that and then move into stage two, which is the communication of that boundary. So step one, understanding what the boundary is. Step two is then communicating that boundary to my environment. It can be like a posted warning sign, do not enter here, do not cross, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Whatever it is, the way that we communicate that is very, very, very important. It can be a no, that's not okay, or a maybe, or I need to think about that. So first, know what your boundary is. Second, communicate it. Then the third, I'm not going to say it's the most important piece, but I find that this is the piece that people really struggle on, is enforcing that boundary. You have to then actually hold the boundary, hold the line, whatever that line is. So if you think about your own body, we have a, central nervous system. There's then fascia and bone and muscle and skin. So there's a very clear boundary. The boundary is the skin. We communicate that just through the visual of the skin. And then we enforce that boundary on a very gross physical level with, don't tread on me. But even inside, we have an immune system that will literally attack foreign invaders that come into our boundary. The same is true with castle law. If someone breaks into your home, you are allowed to defend yourself and your family. So from this concept, when you break these three phases of the boundary process down, you can understand this is what my boundary is, this is how I communicate it, and this is how I enforce it. Now, it's very easy to have this concept in your mind, but it then can be a challenge to then actually do it, particularly when we interact with those who want to try to press our boundaries, who want to try to encroach upon how we live our life. We can also call this negotiation. And so someone who's very persuasive, I've been accused of being quite persuasive, not deceptive like we do in Dungeons and Dragons. There's a difference between there's also a difference in perception of what is persuasive or deceptive. But when we negotiate with someone, hopefully in good faith, not using deception, we are then able to say, hey, is that actually where your boundary is? Maybe if it's for a meeting, hey, can you meet at 4:30 instead of 5? And that then we need to have some sort of flexible boundary to be able to mitigate that difference. I find with clients, however, you can really trust your instincts, really understand in your gut what that difference is for you. You have an entire onboard system inside of your body that can alert you to whether or not it is predation, someone trying to prey upon you, of actually trying to deceive you or trying to manipulate you, versus someone just trying to have a good, healthy relationship and trying to communicate or maybe even better understand what that boundary is. So if this was a coaching call with a client, I would now ask the other person, what is a really good or important boundary that you're working on? So I actually have someone here in the studio now. So I'm going to ask them, what's a good boundary that you're working on that you would ask?
That people speak to me with mutual respect.
Excellent. So I'm hearing mutual respect. So this is a great example. So when someone communicates to you with a respectful tone, you can feel it in your body and you say, oh, wow, this person respects me. They value me and they're interacting with me in a way that lifts me up. Now, when that person doesn't speak to you with respect, how do you feel?
Devalued as a person.
He says he feels devalued as a person, and that I'm sure hits him right in the gut. Now, we would then say, okay, when you feel devalued, when your boundaries are encroached upon, what then do you do in that moment? How do you then enforce your boundary? That's a step three. And you may not even need the actual step two of kind of letting your environment know. You can give a warning. So how do you, in this case, when you feel disrespected, how do you voice to your environment that you're not feeling good? You feel that body sensation, then what do?
You take a breath.
He takes a breath. I love it.
And then you clearly communicate in a way that doesn't give the person ammunition used against you.
He says he then clearly communicates in a way that doesn't give the other person ammunition to use against him. And I love that. So what he's saying here is that he's going to enforce his boundary in a way that doesn't allow the other person to transgress upon him. He's going to alert his environment what his boundary is by stating, this is not all right with me. And then he doesn't allow any further predation against him, any more further predatory behavior against him by not giving them any ground in which to encroach upon him. When that works well, it's great. When it doesn't work well and they do continue to approach you, what do?
You cut off your energy, you walk away, you let the person linger in what they've created.
I love it. He says, and when that person still comes and still tries to encroach upon you, you cut your energy off and you walk away. This is a great example of not actually entering into a conflict and not bringing charge into the situation. And so in a coaching call, we would then break this down by looking at ways in your life that you are having your boundaries encroached upon, and exactly how my good friend here stated, how you can then hold that line without giving ammunition and without allowing them to actually come upon you any further and allowing them to just have what's theirs. There's a great Zen adage, if someone offers you tea and you don't want it, you don't have to drink it. Whose tea does that truly belong to? It belongs to the other person. And just like water on your skin, whatever then is there, it just slides right off. So with really good boundaries, we are then allowed and able to enforce the sanctity of self without being reactive to what we're seeing in our environment. Now, what can be a real challenge? Let's say we have some sort of childhood wounding or a trigger point or something in us that is more eagerly kind of activated. And so when someone says something and then kind of our hackles rise, that energy rises up, our adrenaline starts to kind of get kicked. That can then be a challenge because then we add fuel to that particular fire. And so in those cases, and my good friend here, he did a great job of saying, taking a deep breath. So he's emotionally regulating himself, which I would always encourage people to do. And I have learned the hard way that when you don't emotionally regulate yourself, you become your own worst liability. To take a deep breath and then understand what the other person is doing is triggering you and making it less about them and more about you. They can still be an asshole. They can still be wrong, but your reaction is yours and you own that because we don't, again, want to further whatever the dynamic is. So a truly strong boundary then doesn't allow there to be conflict inside of yourself that then perpetuates conflict externally, allowing them to then transgress upon you. I know this is kind of a large concept. In our coaching calls and in our group coaching, we look at this very carefully. What wounding do we have? What kinks in our armor do we have that allow other people to have an egress point into us, into our most vulnerable parts, into our literal wounded children? And we then go utilizing internal family systems to take a look at those past experiences that really hurt us as a child. And because those parts of us, that kind of the kinks in our armor, they are quite literally the wounded versions of ourselves in those past moments when we weren't able to protect ourselves. And when we then feel like a child as an adult or a young adult, when someone is transgressing upon us verbally or physically, we revert back to our last behavioral pattern that we knew when we were that age, which can be a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old, or maybe even an infant if our developmental trauma is young enough. And so to really heal, and I leverage internal family systems, we then go back in time and we heal those wounded parts. We don't outcast them, we don't shame them, but we hold them. And sometimes they're babies. I know that sounds silly, but we all do have that inner child. I have an 8-year-old and I remember holding her and I remember thinking, wow, there's a part of me still that wishes that I could be held even as an adult. And those parts of us need to be held, not by someone else. They can be held by a lover, but that's different. We need to hold them ourselves. So truly good boundaries is knowing how to keep the parts of us safe, those wounded children of our own childhood, safe from a very, at times, cruel world. So we've covered a lot here about boundaries and done some internal family systems healing and talked about inner child work as well. But I want you to know that when you have a really solid understanding of your boundaries, what they are, how to communicate them, and how to enforce them, you are able to navigate the world and your life with ease and effective joy. There's no other word to put it. The ability to move effortlessly through space, feeling confident and safe.